They told him it was a setup, a joke, a way to watch him squirm in front of a woman they'd already decided was beneath notice. What they didn't expect, what none of them saw coming, was that Logan Pierce would walk into that cafe, sit down across from a stranger, and walk out 2 hours later with something none of his coworkers had ever managed to find for themselves: a real human connection. This is the story of what happens when cruelty accidentally creates something beautiful, and what it costs everyone involved to finally tell the truth. If this story speaks to you, hit the like button right now and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. Now let's get into it. The cafe was called Groundwork, and it sat on the corner of East Lake and Mercer like it had always been there. Worn wooden tables, mismatched chairs, the smell of dark roast coffee soaked into every surface. Seattle rain tapped quietly against the window glass. It was the kind of Saturday afternoon that made the city feel smaller than it was. Like everyone had retreated indoors and the streets belonged only to pigeons and puddles. Logan Pierce arrived 7 minutes late. Not because he'd gotten lost. Not because traffic had been difficult. He'd been sitting in his car in the parking garage across the street for 22 minutes, engine off, watching the rain streak down the windshield, trying to talk himself out of the whole thing. He was 32 years old. He had a daughter at home with a babysitter who charged $15 an hour. He had code to review, a pull request that had been sitting in the queue since Thursday, and approximately zero interest in walking into a cafe to meet a woman he'd never spoken to, arranged by coworkers he didn't particularly trust. He should have said no. He knew he should have said no. But Derek had caught him on a Tuesday in the break room, right when Logan had his hands full with a microwave burrito and a coffee that was already getting cold. And Derek had this way of talking where he filled all the available silence before you could get a word in edgewise. It's just coffee. It's just casual. She's new to the city. We figured you two might hit it off. Come on, man, you never do anything. And Logan, tired in the bone-deep way that single parents are tired, had said fine, just to make the conversation stop. He regretted it approximately 30 seconds later and had been regretting it ever since. He got out of the car. The rain was light enough that he didn't bother with the hood on his jacket. He crossed the street, pushed open the door of Groundwork, and stood in the entrance for a moment, letting the warmth hit him. The hiss of the espresso machine, the low murmur of conversations, someone's laptop playing music through tinny speakers. Saturday afternoon regulars, a couple sharing a pastry near the window, two college kids with textbooks spread across a table they'd clearly colonized for hours. And then, in the back corner, a woman sitting alone with a cup of something warm, scrolling on her phone, a canvas tote bag hooked over the back of the chair beside her. Logan recognized her from the photo Derek had shown him. Maya Reynolds, 30 years old, graphic designer, recently relocated from Portland, knew almost nobody in the city yet. What Derek had not mentioned, what Logan realized now was probably deliberate, was that Maya was a plus-size woman, and that several of his coworkers had apparently thought this was relevant information. Amusing, even. The kind of detail they'd left out on purpose, expecting Logan to walk in, register visible discomfort, and either bolt or bumble through the interaction in a way that would be entertaining to reconstruct on Monday morning. Logan stood at the entrance and understood this in about 4 seconds. Then he took a breath, crossed the cafe, and sat down. Maya? She looked up from her phone. Her eyes were brown and a little wary, the look of someone who had been in enough uncomfortable situations to recognize the early warning signs of one. She had natural hair pulled back loosely, a rust-colored sweater, silver earrings shaped like small crescents. "That's me," she said. Her voice was measured, careful. "Logan?" "Yeah." He put his jacket over the back of the chair, flagged down a server, and ordered a black coffee. Then he looked at her directly. "How long have you been waiting?" "About 15 minutes. I'm sorry. I sat in my car for a while debating whether to come in." She blinked. That had clearly not been what she expected him to say. "Okay," she said slowly. "Why are you telling me that?" "Because you probably sat here for 15 minutes wondering if you were about to get stood up, and that's not fair to you. You deserve to know I was at least in the vicinity." He paused. "Also because I figure if we're going to sit here and talk, there's no point pretending this isn't a weird situation. Maya studied him for a moment, the way people do when they're trying to decide whether someone is being genuine or performing sincerity. Then something in her expression shifted, not quite a smile yet, but the precursor to one, a softening at the corners of her eyes. "It is a pretty weird situation," she said. "Did they tell you anything about me?" "They said you were a software engineer, you were quiet, you had good taste in coffee, and that you could use some company." She tilted her head. "Did they tell you anything about me?" Logan thought about the photo, about the way Derek had grinned when he'd handed over his phone, about the laughter that had broken out among the small cluster of coworkers who'd apparently been in on this together. He thought about all of that, and he said, "Not really," which was technically true, and also the kindest version of the truth he could manage right now. His coffee arrived. He wrapped both hands around the mug, a habit, something he did without thinking, had done it since he was a kid, and looked out the rain-streaked window for a moment. "How long have you been in Seattle?" he asked. 6 weeks. She said it the way you say a number that sounds small even to yourself. "It still doesn't feel real. I keep waking up and forgetting I moved." "Where are you from originally?" "Portland. Grew up there. Lived there my whole life until—" She stopped, made a small gesture with her hand, "until I didn't anymore." Logan nodded. He wasn't going to push. He understood the particular grammar of leaving things out in a conversation with a stranger. "I grew up in Tacoma," he said. "Moved here about 5 years ago. Do you like it?" "Some days." He considered. "The winters are ugly. The summers are worth it." That's a diplomatic answer. "I've had time to practice." She smiled then, for real this time, and Logan noticed that it changed her whole face, the wariness receding, something genuinely warm underneath. Across town, in a group chat that Logan was not part of, 4 of his coworkers were waiting. The chat was called, with the particular creative poverty of office humor, The Experiment. It had been Derek's idea. Derek Calloway, 29 years old, lead developer on the infrastructure team, and the kind of person who mistook being the loudest in a room for being the funniest. He'd brought in 2 others, Priya, who mostly laughed at whatever Derek said because it was easier than arguing, and Marcus, who had a talent for appearing uninvolved while being deeply involved. The original idea had been simple. Set Logan up with someone Derek assumed Logan would find uncomfortable, convince him to go. Watch what happened. Report back. He went in. Priya texted. "Anyone placing bets on how fast he leaves?" Derek responded. "Give him 10 minutes, Marcus wrote. They waited. 10 minutes passed. "Still there?" Derek asked. "Still there," Priya confirmed. She was parked in a coffee shop 2 blocks away, which was either dedication to the joke or something more uncomfortable than she was admitting to herself. "Looks like they're actually talking. No way. He's probably just being polite." He ordered another coffee. A pause. "Huh." 1. Back at Groundwork, Logan was explaining the difference between his job and what most people imagined when they heard software engineer. Everyone thinks it's just sitting in a dark room typing, like you're always doing something mysterious and technical. He wrapped his hands around his second coffee. Mostly it's reading other people's code and trying to understand why they made the choices they made. A lot of the time you can tell what kind of mood someone was in when they wrote something. "That's kind of like graphic design," Maya said. She'd leaned forward slightly without seeming to notice it. "You can tell when someone was rushing, or when they were bored, or when they were actually excited about what they were working on." Exactly. What does excited code look like? Logan thought about it. "Over-engineered," he said. "Like the person got really into solving the problem and kept going past where they needed to stop. There's usually some elegant solution buried in there, but it's surrounded by 15 other things the person added because they were having fun." Maya laughed. It was an unguarded laugh, quick and real. "That's what excited design looks like too. You end up with 12 versions of something, and the client picks the simplest one, and you have to pretend you're not dying inside." "Do you like it? The work itself?" She considered the question with the attention it deserved, which Logan appreciated. He had a low tolerance for people who answered every question the same way, regardless of what was actually asked. "I like solving the visual problem," she said finally. "I like that moment when you figure out what something needs to look like, and you can just feel that it's right. before you can even articulate why. She paused. The client management part I could do without. What kinds of things do you design? Whatever pays. She said it straightforwardly, without embarrassment. Right now I'm doing brand identity work for small businesses, logos, packaging, that kind of thing. I had a larger agency job in Portland, but again, the small stop, the editing. I needed a change. Logan didn't ask, but he filed it away the way you file things when you're paying attention to a person. Stored quietly, not forgotten. What made you pick Seattle specifically? He asked instead. I had a friend here. She kept saying I should visit, so I visited. And the first morning I woke up in her apartment, I looked out the window at the water, and I thought, I want to be somewhere that looks like this. She glanced at the rain. Which is ironic because apparently this city looks like this approximately 300 days a year. 220 statistically. That's still a lot. You get used to it, he paused. Or you move to Arizona. Have you ever been tempted? My daughter has never seen a summer without rain, and she thinks it's normal. I'm not going to be the one to disappoint her. It was the first time he'd mentioned his daughter, and he watched Maya's face to see how she took it. It was a reflex, one he'd developed over years of reading rooms, reading people, waiting for the calculation to happen behind someone's eyes. Oh, he has a kid, single dad. That's complicated. That changes things. Maya's expression didn't do any of that. She just said, How old is she? 7. Her name's Nora. Does she like Seattle? She thinks the Space Needle is pretty okay, and that Pike Place Market smells funny, but she's serious about the Pike Place Market position and has been for 2 years, so I take it seriously. Maya smiled. What does she think smells funny about it? Fish. She's got a whole theory about fish. Of course she does. There was something in Maya's voice, genuine warmth, not the performative kind that people deploy when they're trying to seem like they like children. 7 is such a good age for having whole theories about things. She has one about clouds too, and about why grocery stores put the cereal on the highest shelves. The cereal theory sounds important. It's elaborate. There's a villain. They had been talking for an hour. Logan noticed this the way you notice you've been reading for longer than you thought. A mild surprise, not unpleasant. He couldn't remember the last time he'd sat in a cafe on a Saturday afternoon and just talked to someone. Not about work, not about logistics, not about Nora's school schedule or the leak under the kitchen sink or whether he'd gotten the grocery order in on time. Just talking. Maya noticed the shift in the afternoon light and glanced at her phone. We've been here for an hour, she said. I know. A pause. Outside, the rain had softened to something barely there, just a shimmer on the glass. Do you want to order something to eat? She asked. It was a careful offer, a way of extending the afternoon without demanding it. Logan looked at the menu board and then back at her. Yeah, he said. I do. Yeah. What neither of them talked about that first afternoon were the harder things. Maya didn't talk about why she'd really left Portland. She didn't mention the relationship that had ended badly or the friend group that had fractured along with it, or the specific cruelty of watching people you'd trusted choose sides and not choose yours. She didn't mention the years of navigating spaces where she was always the biggest woman in the room and learning to read before anyone said a word, whether the room would be kind about it. Logan didn't talk about Nora's mother. He didn't talk about the year after she left. Not dramatically, not with cruelty, just quietly and completely. When Nora was 2 years old and Logan was 25 and had to figure out, essentially overnight, how to be the only parent. He didn't talk about the coworkers who'd treated his life like a conversation topic. He didn't talk about what it had cost him to stop trusting people, or how high the walls were now, or whether he even believed he could let them down. They talked about the easy things, the surface things, but here's what was true. The easy things didn't feel easy. They felt like practice. Like two people who had forgotten how to have this kind of afternoon and were slowly, carefully remembering. At 4:47 p.m., Maya's phone buzzed with a message from her friend Diane. How's the mystery date? She turned the phone face down. At 4:51 p.m., Derek texted Priya. They're still there? Priya, who had long since left her coffee shop and was now home and was getting increasingly uncomfortable with the whole thing, read the message and didn't respond. Tiens. They ordered avocado toast and a shared plate of roasted vegetables, because the cafe's lunch menu was limited and neither of them had eaten since morning. Maya ate without self-consciousness, which Logan noticed because he'd seen enough people who didn't, who calibrated every meal against some imagined audience, to recognize the difference. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said. "Go ahead." "Why did you actually come today? Because you said you almost didn't, and from the way you said it, it sounded like more than just normal nerves." Logan looked at her. He thought about the honest answer, and the honest answer had edges he wasn't ready to cut himself on yet, so he gave her the truthful but partial version. "I don't usually do things like this," he said. "Meeting strangers, social things. I've gotten a little isolated, I think. Intentionally." He paused. "And I almost let that win. But then I thought, there's a real person sitting in that cafe waiting and bailing on her because I'm scared of an afternoon sounds like something I don't want to be." Maya looked at him steadily. "That's a pretty honest answer," she said. "You asked an honest question. Most people would have just said they got stuck in traffic." "There wasn't any traffic. It's Saturday." She smiled. "Then I almost canceled too. My friend who told me about this, she said it was a good opportunity to meet people. And I thought, okay, maybe she's right. I need to stop hiding in my apartment and going to the same coffee shop every morning because it's comfortable and safe." She looked out the window. "But I knew, walking in, I knew something felt a little off, like I was being looked at before I even walked through the door." Logan's jaw tightened slightly. He said nothing. "It's fine," she said, reading something in his expression. "It's not the first time. You learn to walk through it. You shouldn't have to." "No," she agreed simply. "But that's different from not having to." They stayed until the cafe began filling up with the early dinner crowd, and the ambient noise made it harder to hear each other. Logan left the tip, more than he needed to, some habit of generosity that lived alongside his general guardedness, and they walked out together into the damp evening air. The rain had stopped. The pavement reflected streetlights and the tail end of the winter sky, a deep blue that lasted about 20 minutes before it became full dark. "Thank you for staying," Maya said. They were standing on the sidewalk in the particular social purgatory of a first conversation ending where nobody quite knows how to close the parenthesis. "Thank you for the same," Logan said. A pause. "I don't actually do this much," she said. "Meet people. I tend to stick to what's known." "Yeah." He understood that. He understood it well. "Me too." But this was... She stopped, seemed to decide something. "This was a good afternoon." It was. She pulled out her phone. "If you wanted to, we don't have to call it anything, but if you wanted to get coffee again sometime, actual coffee, not whatever that was," a small, self-deprecating gesture at the cafe, "I'd be open to that." Logan looked at her, at the small crescent earrings and the rust-colored sweater and the careful honesty of someone who was extending themselves a little further than comfortable because something had told them it was worth trying. "Yeah," he said. "I'd be open to that." They exchanged numbers on the sidewalk, the way people have been doing since phones became something you carried in your pocket. No elaborate goodbye, no performance. Maya walked north toward the bus stop. Logan walked south toward the parking garage. He sat in his car for a moment before starting the engine. Something had happened this afternoon that he hadn't expected, and he wasn't ready to name it yet. But it was there, quiet and real. The way things are when they're actually true rather than constructed. He started the car and pulled out into the Seattle evening, and drove home to relieve the babysitter and hear Nora's theories about whatever she'd decided to have theories about today. And somewhere behind him, the cafe lights were still on, still warm, still filling up with the ordinary lives of people doing ordinary things on an ordinary Saturday. What had happened in there was small. It just didn't feel that way. The babysitter, a 16-year-old named Josie from 2 floors up who Nora adored because Josie let her watch nature documentaries, was already putting on her coat when Logan walked in. "She was fine," Josie said. "We watched something about jellyfish. She now has opinions about jellyfish." "Does the jellyfish opinion have a villain?" "2 of them, actually. Logan paid her and closed the door and went to find Nora, who was on the living room floor in her pajamas with her stuffed rabbit, surrounded by library books, seemingly in the middle of something important. "Dad?" She said it as a greeting, not a question, flat and affectionate. "Hey, Bug. Did you go on a date?" He sat on the couch and looked at her. "Who told you that?" "Josie said you went to have coffee with someone. That's what dates are." "It wasn't a date. It was coffee with a person." Nora looked up at him with the particular expression she had inherited from nobody, entirely her own, that conveyed measured skepticism beyond her years. "That's still a date, Dad. Go to bed." "It's only 8:15. Bed, Nora." She gathered her rabbit and her most important book and made her way down the hall with the long-suffering gait of a child going to bed at a reasonable hour who has decided this is an injustice. At the doorway, she turned around. "Was she nice?" Logan looked at his daughter, 7 years old, and already she asked the right questions. "Yeah," he said. "She was." Nora nodded, apparently satisfied, and disappeared into her room. Logan sat in the quiet of his apartment for a while. The rain had come back. It always came back, and he could hear it against the windows, steady and soft. The sound Seattle made when it was just being itself. He thought about the way Maya had said you learn to walk through it, the flatness of it, the acceptance that sat under it like bedrock. He thought about the way she'd laughed at the excited code thing, quick and real, no performance in it. He thought about what he'd said. There's a real person sitting in that cafe, like he'd had to remind himself that the stakes were human, like somewhere along the way he'd stopped thinking about new people as real and had started thinking about them as variables, predictable, potentially costly, better kept at a distance. He hadn't done that today. He wasn't sure what to do with that yet, but he held it carefully, the way you hold something that matters before you've decided where to put it, and let the rain keep doing what the rain does, and eventually got up to get a glass of water and go to bed. In a group chat he didn't know about, Derek typed, "Well, that was anticlimactic." Nobody responded. Priya, in her apartment across town, read the message and felt something she couldn't quite name, a sourness at the back of her throat, like she'd eaten something that was almost fine and wasn't. She put her phone down and didn't pick it up again until morning. Marcus, who had orchestrated slightly more of this than he'd admitted to anyone, did not respond either. He was thinking about the fact that Logan had stayed for 3 hours. 3 hours. That wasn't what they'd expected. That wasn't what the joke was supposed to produce. But then, sometimes things didn't go the way you expected. Sometimes they went somewhere else entirely. The following Wednesday, Logan's phone buzzed at 12:08 p.m., right in the middle of a code review, which he paused without hesitation. "Hey, it's Maya. There's a coffee shop on Capitol Hill I've been wanting to try, and I was going to go Saturday morning. Interested?" He read it once, then again, then typed, "Yeah, send me the address." Her reply, "Told you I wouldn't call it anything." His, "You said you'd be open to it. You never specified what it was." Hers, "Touché. Saturday at 10? His, "10 works." He put his phone down and went back to the code review, and if there was something lighter about the afternoon than there'd been about the mornings that week, he kept that to himself. Some things you protect. Not because they're fragile, because they're new. The coffee shop on Capitol Hill was called Analog, and it was the kind of place that had decided very firmly what it was. Mismatched vintage furniture, records on the wall, an espresso machine that looked like it had been imported from somewhere in Italy and treated with more care than most people treated their cars. The barista had a sleeve tattoo and knew every regular by name and was in the middle of explaining the difference between 2 single-origin Ethiopian roasts to the person ahead of them when Logan walked in and found Maya already at a table by the window. She had a sketchbook open. Not her phone. A sketchbook. Pencil in hand. She was working on something focused enough that she didn't notice him come in, and Logan stood near the door for a moment just registering this. The specific quality of a person absorbed in their own work, the way she held the pencil, loose, almost careless, and the way the lines on the page clearly weren't careless at all. He didn't want to interrupt her, but she looked up before he decided what to do about that. "You're early," she said. You said 10. It's 10:02. That's early for a Saturday. It's late for a Tuesday. She smiled and closed the sketchbook, not hiding it, just setting it aside. Did you find parking? Took the bus. You took the bus to Capitol Hill on a Saturday morning? Nora has a thing at 11. Soccer. I didn't want to deal with the car. He pulled off his jacket and sat across from her. What were you drawing? She hesitated. Not long, just a half-second consideration. Then she slid the sketchbook across the table. He opened it. The page had 3 or 4 loose studies of the coffee shop interior, quick gestural lines, the kind that captured impression more than detail. The espresso machine rendered in about 12 marks. The barista's posture in 5. They were good. Genuinely good. The kind of drawing that had been done by someone who saw things accurately and had trained their hand to follow. These are from today? He asked. Last 15 minutes. That's... He looked up at her. You're fast. It's just sketching. It's not finished work. She took the sketchbook back, but she looked like the compliment had landed somewhere real. I do it to stay loose. If I only draw when there's a client brief in front of me, the work gets tight, cramped. Do you have it with you all the time? Almost. He ordered coffee. The barista recommended the Ethiopian, the washed one, brighter, better for a morning, and Logan went with it without overthinking. When he settled back across from Maya, she had her hands around her own cup, watching him with the calm, observational quality he'd noticed last Saturday, like she was always slightly more interested in looking than in performing. How was your week? She asked. Long. He considered. We had a production issue Wednesday night. I was in a video call until 1 a.m. with 3 people who kept talking past each other. Did you fix it? Eventually, one of those situations where the fix is embarrassingly simple and the problem was embarrassingly dumb, and everyone's too tired to be amused about it. What was the fix? Restarting a service. 2 hours of debugging, and the answer was restarting a service. She laughed. That's almost poetic. It's the opposite of poetic. It's the most humiliating possible outcome. How was Nora's week? He looked at her when she asked that, the naturalness of it. Not how's your daughter in the careful, slightly distant way people said it when they wanted to acknowledge the child's existence without engaging with it. Just Nora, by name, like she'd already decided Nora was a person worth asking after. She had a spelling test, he said. Got 7 out of 10. She was furious about it, but only because she'd gotten 10 out of 10 the week before. What did she get wrong? Necessary, Colonel, receipt. Receipt is actually hard. Don't tell her that. She needs the humility. Harsh. She's 7. She can handle knowing that receipt is spelled in a way that makes no sense. Maya smiled. What does she do with information that bothers her? Like when something doesn't make sense to her? She starts a file. A file. In her head. Things that are wrong. She adds to it regularly. I think receipt is probably in there now, next to why socks have to match and why grocery stores put the cereal on the high shelves. The cereal villain. He's moved up to primary antagonist. She leaned forward on her elbows, and there was something easy about it. The posture of someone who had stopped calculating distance. Does she get that from you? The cataloging things? Logan thought about it. Probably. I tend to notice inconsistencies. Things that don't add up. He paused. It's useful in code. In people, it's more annoying. Does it make you suspicious of people? It makes me slow to trust them. He said it plainly, the way he'd said things plainly last Saturday, the way she'd noticed and hadn't flinched from. There's a difference. Suspicious means you assume the worst. Slow to trust means you wait for evidence. What's the evidence look like? Consistency, mostly. Whether someone's the same person on a Tuesday as they are on a Saturday, whether they say what they mean. He looked at her steadily. Whether they ask the same kind of question twice and actually listen to the answer both times. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked down at her coffee. I think I'm slow to trust too. I just don't usually frame it that way. How do you frame it? I say I'm private. She turned the cup slightly in her hands. A small nervous movement, barely there. Which is also true. But private and slow to trust are related, I think. You keep things close because you've learned that letting them out doesn't always go the way you hoped. What didn't go the way you hoped? She was quiet for a beat. The espresso machine hissed. Outside, Capitol Hill was waking up in its particular Saturday way. Unhurried, slightly disheveled, nobody in a suit. I had a relationship end, she said, last year. It wasn't dramatic. No one cheated. Nobody was cruel. He had a picture of his life, and I didn't fit the picture. And he kept trying to make me fit, and I kept trying to make myself smaller. And eventually we were both so tired of the effort that we stopped. She paused. The part that was hard wasn't the ending. The part that was hard was realizing that I'd spent 2 years making myself smaller for something that wasn't going to work anyway. Logan didn't say he was sorry. He'd always found that reflexive, something you said when you didn't know what else to say. Instead, he said, "What would not smaller have looked like?" She looked up. The question had surprised her. "I don't know," she said. "That's the honest answer. I'm still figuring that out." He nodded. He understood that. The long project of figuring out who you were once you stopped measuring yourself against someone else's expectations. "The reason I came to Seattle," she said slowly, "wasn't just because of Diane. That was part of it. But mostly, I needed to be somewhere that didn't know the smaller version of me, somewhere I could just start over, be whoever I actually am." She made a small, self-conscious gesture. "That sounds more dramatic than I mean it to." "It doesn't sound dramatic," Logan said. "It sounds like a reasonable thing to need." She looked at him. Something in her expression shifted. Not relief exactly, but its quieter cousin. The feeling of having said something true and had it received without it being made into a bigger or smaller thing than it was. "You're easy to talk to," she said, "which is not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Quieter, I think. Your coworker made you sound like you barely spoke." "I barely speak to people I don't trust." "And people you trust?" "I apparently talked their ear off about my daughter and receipt spellings and production incidents that ended with restarting a service." She laughed again, that real, unguarded one. And Logan thought about what he'd noticed last Saturday, that her laugh changed her whole face, and then he stopped thinking about it because that was the kind of thought he wasn't sure what to do with yet. They stayed at Analog for 2 hours. When they finally walked out into the Capitol Hill morning, Maya's sketchbook tucked under her arm, Logan's hands in his pockets against the bite in the air, they stood on the sidewalk with the slightly dazed quality of people who'd been inside a warm place for a while and now had to reacclimate to the actual world. "Same time next week?" Maya said. Logan thought about the code review he had Monday, the one-on-one with his manager Tuesday, the production deployment Thursday that was going to be either fine or catastrophic with very little in between. "Yeah," he said. "Same time next week." He took the bus back to Nora's soccer thing and spent 45 minutes standing on a wet field in Fremont, watching 7-year-olds chase a ball with the chaotic energy of people who haven't learned yet that strategy matters. Nora scored once and missed twice and didn't seem to care about any of it as long as she was running. On the drive home, she asked, "Did you see the coffee shop lady again?" "Her name's Maya." "Did you see Maya again?" "Yeah." "Is she nice?" "I told you she was nice." "You said she was nice after one time. One time doesn't count." She was very serious about this. "You have to see someone more than once to know if they're actually nice or just being polite." Logan looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. "Where did you learn that?" "You told me that." He had, actually. Probably while explaining why she couldn't invite a kid from her class to her birthday after only one playdate. "Yeah," he said. "She's actually nice." Nora appeared to file this in a different column than the things that are wrong file. Something that was going right, maybe. She didn't say anything else about it. Just looked out the window at the wet Seattle streets and started telling him about a cloud formation she'd seen during the game that had looked exactly like a whale. He listened and drove, and the afternoon felt steadier than most afternoons had in a while. Over the weeks that followed, they fell into a rhythm. Saturday mornings, rotating coffee shops, Analog, then a place in Fremont called Lighthouse, then a small Japanese-style cafe in the International District, where the pour-overs took 12 minutes and everyone seemed to understand that this was worth waiting for. They texted through the week. Not constantly. Neither of them had that kind of relationship with their phone, but enough. A thing Logan had seen on a walk, a design problem Maya was stuck on, a Nora story, a work frustration edited down to its essential absurdity. It was careful and easy at the same time. The careful part was the part where they were both paying attention to how much they were extending themselves, measuring the risk the way people do when they've been burned before. The easy part was that none of it felt like effort. The third Saturday at Lighthouse, Maya brought her laptop and showed him the brand identity package she was working on. A small bakery in Wallingford, woman-owned, had been operating for 12 years under a logo that looked like it was designed in 2003 by someone who had just discovered word art. Maya had rebuilt the whole visual system from scratch. New logo, new color palette, new typography, new packaging concepts. Logan looked at it seriously. Not the polite way people look at creative work when they don't really know how to read it. He looked at each piece with the focused attention he brought to code, trying to understand the decisions that had been made, why, what problem each element solved. The color palette, he said. That's not what I would have expected for a bakery. No, most bakeries go warm tones. Cream, terracotta, that whole thing. She pulled up the palette. The colors she'd chosen were a kind of dusty sage green, deep navy, and a very restrained warm gold. But when I talked to the owner, she kept using the word serious. She wanted people to know that what she makes is serious work. Not cute, not Instagram friendly, serious. So the colors are for her, not for the customer's expectations. For both. A customer who wants cute will go somewhere cute. The customers she's trying to reach will look at this and feel something different. She clicked to the next slide. The logo is the tricky part. I went through 11 versions. Can I see them? She pulled up the document with all 11. Logan went through them slowly, and this was the thing that he kept noticing about her. She didn't talk while he was looking. Most people filled silence because they were nervous about being evaluated. Maya let him look. This one, he said, stopping at version 7. This is almost it. She leaned over to see which one. Yeah, that's what I thought too. It's close. What's wrong with it? The letter forms are too similar in weight to the icon. The eye doesn't know where to land first. She pulled out her sketchbook and quickly roughed out what she meant. If the icon is slightly heavier, it becomes an anchor. Then the name reads underneath, which is what you want. Icon first, name second, both equal in presence but sequential in reading order. Logan followed the sketch. Like a hierarchy in a UI. Exactly like that. Is that where you ended up? Version 11. You can see. She scrolled. One small adjustment in stroke weight, and it all clicks. He studied it. She was right. It clicked. Bakery as serious business, logo as anchor, the whole visual system coherent and purposeful. That's really good, he said. You're good at this. When the brief is good, the work is easier. She closed the laptop. She was easy to listen to. Some clients I talked to for an hour, and I don't have a single useful thing to work with. She talked for 20 minutes and gave me everything. What makes a good brief? Honest emotion, not the strategy stuff, the feeling stuff. This owner said, I want people to walk in and feel like they're in a kitchen that knows what it's doing. That's a brief. That's something you can design toward. Logan thought about that. Code briefs are usually terrible, he said. They tell you the technical requirements and nothing about the person who's going to use it. Which means what? You're designing for a ghost? You're designing for an imagined user that nobody's actually talked to. He paused. The best product managers I've worked with are the ones who talk to real users first and build from there, but there aren't that many of them. Is there one at your company? Not exactly. He considered. There's one who tries. She gets close. What's the difference between trying and getting there? Getting there means being willing to hear something that changes the whole spec. Trying means wanting to hear it, but then going back to the original spec anyway because it's safer. Maya nodded slowly. That's the same in design. The clients who get the best work are the ones who can change their mind when you show them something true. The ones who can't, they get fine work, not good work. Is there a difference between fine and good? Fine works, good lasts. She said it simply, not like a quote. like something she'd arrived at through the particular friction of her own experience. Logan looked at her and thought about how different it was to talk to someone who had actually thought about things versus someone who had collected other people's thoughts about things. They ate lunch after the coffee that day. Tacos from a truck outside, standing on the sidewalk because the tables were full, talking about the specific etiquette of food trucks and whether it was acceptable to order 3 things from the same category if all 3 were different flavors. Maya's position was yes, obviously. Logan's position was that it depended on the length of the line. They disagreed and kept disagreeing warmly for the entire 20 minutes it took to eat. The 4th Saturday, Nora had a cold and Logan showed up late and visibly tired, the kind of tired that sits behind a person's eyes even when they're trying not to show it. Maya looked at him when he sat down and said, "How long has she been sick?" 3 days? Sleeping? On and off. She woke up at 4 this morning and wanted to watch a nature documentary about octopuses, and I didn't have the energy to argue, so we watched it. Is she better? She ate almost a full bowl of soup last night, so probably. Maya didn't say you should have canceled. She didn't say you looked terrible. She signaled the barista and ordered a large coffee for him without asking whether he wanted it, and when it came, she pushed it across the table without ceremony. He looked at it, then at her. "Thank you," he said. "Did you eat this morning?" "I had half of what Nora didn't finish." "That's not eating. It's technically eating." She ordered him a pastry. He ate it without arguing. They talked, but slower than usual. Logan's energy was low, and she seemed to understand that today was a different kind of Saturday. She showed him things on her phone instead of asking him questions. A design project she'd been looking at, a photographer she liked, a video of a dog attempting to understand a sliding glass door. She didn't require him to be anything today. She just let him be tired in the presence of someone who didn't mind. Around 11:30, he said, "I should get back. Go." She said it without any of the performance of reluctance. "Tell Nora I hope she feels better." "I will." "Does she like soup, or does she endure soup?" "She endures it. She's been very vocal about enduring it." "What does she actually want?" "Ramen. She's convinced ramen would fix everything." Maya considered this. She might not be wrong. If she gets full ramen as a sick day food, she'll have a moral crisis every time she doesn't feel well. That's a very paranoid position. I've been parenting for 7 years. Paranoia is a survival mechanism. She smiled, and he put on his jacket and paused at the edge of the table. "This was still good," he said. "Even like this. Thank you for—" He stopped. Wasn't sure how to finish it. "Same time next week," she said. He left. On the bus home, he thought about the pastry. The unasked-for pastry, pushed across the table without making it a moment, without expecting acknowledgement. The smallest possible act of care. Barely worth noticing, really, if you weren't the specific kind of person who noticed those things. Logan was exactly that kind of person. He noticed. The 5th Saturday was different. Nora was healthy again, and Logan had slept, and the morning was clear in the grudging way that Seattle managed clear occasionally in the late weeks of winter. The kind of clear that felt like the city was showing you something it usually kept to itself. They went back to groundwork, the first place, half by accident and half because it was the easiest choice, and they'd both been somewhere easier to be with each other lately. They'd ordered their drinks and were halfway through a conversation about whether Seven was too young to start learning an instrument. Logan's position was yes, Maya's was that it depended on the instrument. When she said something that broke the easy surface of the morning in a way neither of them had planned. She'd been talking about her own childhood, something she did in small pieces, not chronologically but thematically, the way you share things when you trust someone enough to give them the real version, but not yet enough to give them the whole story. She mentioned a family gathering, a relative's comment, something that had been said about her body when she was 9 years old, said casually by an adult who probably forgot it the moment it left their mouth and wouldn't remember it today if asked. She said it plainly, matter of fact, not asking for anything, but Logan went very still. "You were 9, he said. "Yeah. And someone said that to you?" "Yeah." She looked at him. "It's not. I've made peace with most of it. Most of it. Most of it." She met his eyes. You never make peace with all of it. Some things stay put. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something he hadn't planned to say. Nora's mother left when Nora was 2. She told me before she left that she'd always felt like our life together was smaller than what she'd wanted. Like I was smaller than what she'd wanted. He paused. She wasn't cruel about it. She was just honest. And I think about that a lot. Whether I made her smaller too, or whether she just needed more space than I knew how to give. Maya looked at him. Do you think she was right? She asked carefully. I think we were wrong together, he said. I think that's different from either of us being wrong alone. He looked at his coffee. But the part that stuck, the part that I still carry, is the smaller thing, the idea that I was less than what someone needed. He glanced up. You don't forget that. No, Maya said softly. You don't. They sat with that for a moment, not trying to fix it, not offering the expected comfort, just sitting with the weight of 2 true things that had been said in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning by 2 people who had been careful with each other for weeks and had suddenly, without planning it, stopped being careful. Outside, Seattle was going about its business. Inside, something had shifted. Not dramatically, not with any ceremony. Just the way things shift when 2 people have been circling towards something and finally stop pretending they aren't. Neither of them named it. That would come later, in its own time, in its own way. For now, it was enough that it had been said, that the weight of it had been acknowledged, that 2 people who had each learned to keep things close had chosen, in the same hour, to put something real on the table. Logan looked at her across the coffee cups and the crumbs from the thing they'd shared and the sketchbook she hadn't opened today because she'd been too busy talking, and he thought, I don't know what this is yet, but it's something. He held that thought carefully. Outside, the city kept moving, indifferent and alive, doing what cities do, going on, going forward, carrying its people from one moment to the next without asking their permission or waiting for them to be ready. Neither Logan nor Maya was ready, but they were both there. The thing about a secret is that it never stays still. It doesn't sit quietly in the place you left it. It shifts. It seeps into the edges of conversations. It changes the way you look at people, the way they look at you, and eventually, always eventually, it finds its way out, usually through the smallest possible crack, usually at the worst possible moment. Logan had known, from the first Saturday, what the setup had really been. He'd understood it walking across that cafe floor, had processed it in the time it took him to pull out a chair and say her name. He'd made a choice in that moment, to treat Maya like a person and not like a punchline. And he hadn't regretted it for a single day since. But he'd also never told her. He'd filed it away, that knowledge, in the same way he filed other difficult things, stored, not forgotten, something he'd deal with when the right moment arrived. What he hadn't fully accounted for was the fact that the right moment doesn't arrive on its own. It has to be built, or it's forced on you, and in Logan's experience, it was almost always the latter. The crack appeared on a Tuesday. He was in the break room at 11:40 a.m., the 15-minute window between his morning stand-up and a product sync that he'd already spent half the day dreading. He was making coffee, a task he performed with the automaticity of someone who had given up expecting the office machine to be good and had simply made peace with adequate. When he heard Derek's voice in the hallway, he wasn't the subject of the conversation. That was the thing. He was just a man making coffee, and Derek and Marcus were just 2 people walking past an open door, and the words drifted in the way words do when no one is being careful. No, but the thing is, it actually worked out, which is kind of hilarious. He's still seeing her? Apparently every Saturday, Priya saw them at a place in Fremont last week. That's actually kind of crazy, like we did him a favor by accident. I mean, I'm not going to say that to his face, but yeah, it's a little funny. Their voices moved on. The hallway went quiet. Logan stood with the coffee pot in his hand and felt something cold settle into his chest. Not quite rage, not yet. Something more controlled than that. The feeling of a very clear picture coming into focus. One he hadn't wanted to see, but that was now impossible to unsee. They knew. They'd been watching. They'd been talking about it. About Maya. About him. about the Saturdays, like it was an ongoing entertainment. We did him a favor by accident, like Maya was a variable in their experiment that had produced an unexpected result, like she was still part of the joke, just a joke with a different punchline now. He put the coffee pot down. He did not get his coffee. He walked back to his desk, sat down, and for the next 4 hours he was extremely productive in the focused, slightly dangerous way that happens when you're using work to keep yourself from doing something you'd regret. At 4:15 p.m., he sent Derek a message. "Can we talk?" "Conference room B." Derek responded in 2 minutes. "Sure, what's up?" Logan didn't answer that. He went to the conference room and waited. Derek arrived with the easy posture of someone who didn't yet know what the meeting was about. He was 29 and broadly likable in the way that certain people are. Quick with a joke, quick with enthusiasm. The kind of person who was better in groups than one-on-one because the group absorbed some of what he was. He sat down across from Logan with the slightly careful expression people get when they can feel from another person's stillness that this isn't casual. "Hey," Derek said, "what's going on?" Logan looked at him for a moment. He had prepared what he was going to say, which was unusual for him. He tended to think on his feet, trusted his own improvisation, but this felt like something that needed to be said clearly and correctly. "I heard you in the hallway this morning," Logan said. "You and Marcus." Derek's expression shifted, something tightening around the eyes. "Logan, I'm not here to make this dramatic," Logan said. His voice was even. He'd decided on even. "I want to be direct with you about what I know and what I think, and then I want to hear what you have to say." Derek leaned back slightly, nodded. "You set me up with Maya because you thought it would be funny. You didn't tell me who she was or what she looked like because you were expecting me to be uncomfortable. You and at least 2 other people treated the whole thing like a prank." Logan paused. "And then when it didn't go the way you expected, you kept watching. You've been monitoring it. You've been talking about it." Derek opened his mouth and closed it. Whatever version of this conversation he'd been preparing for, this was not it. He stopped. Tried again. "I know how it sounds. I'm asking you to tell me how you meant it, because that's different." "It was..." Derek rubbed the back of his neck. "It started as a joke. You're right about that. We thought..." He stopped. "Say what you thought." "We thought you'd be uncomfortable. We thought it would be I don't know, funny, something to talk about." He said it with the particular tone of someone hearing their own reasoning out loud for the first time and being troubled by the sound of it. I know how that comes across." "It comes across as something you did to 2 real people without their knowledge or consent," Logan said. "You used Maya as part of a joke she had no idea she was in. You've been watching her and talking about her ever since. She's a person, Derek. She moved to a new city and was trying to meet people, and you turned that into entertainment." Silence. Real silence, not the kind that precedes a defense. "I know," Derek said, quietly, differently than anything he'd said so far. "I'm also telling you to stop. Whatever you and Marcus and anyone else have been doing, the watching, the commenting, the checking in with Priya about where we are on a given Saturday, stop. It's not a story. It's not yours to watch." Derek looked at the table. He had the expression of a person not quite able to meet someone's eyes, because meeting someone's eyes would require acknowledging something about themselves they weren't ready to acknowledge. "You're right," he said finally. "I'll talk to Marcus. And Priya. And Priya." A pause. "For what it's worth, I didn't think it was still... when it kept going, I started feeling like we'd done something we shouldn't have. I just didn't say anything about it." "Yeah," Logan said. "That's the thing about not saying anything." He stood up. Derek looked up at him. Is Maya okay? Does she know?" Logan looked at him steadily. "Not yet," he said, "but she will." He walked out of the conference room and back to his desk and sat very still for approximately 3 minutes. Then he put on his headphones and worked until 6:30 with the grim efficiency of someone who has done what they needed to do and now has to live inside the consequences of it. The consequences were waiting for him on the bus home. He sat by the window, watching the city move past in the way cities move past from bus windows, quick and slightly unreal, like a film reel, and he thought about what he'd said to Derek. Not yet, but she will. He hadn't planned to say that, but once he said it, he understood it was true and had been true for a while. The question was no longer whether to tell Maya. The question was only how and when, and whether he could find a way to do it that didn't make everything they'd built feel like something that had happened to her rather than something she'd chosen. He didn't have an answer that night. He got home, paid Josie, ate leftover rice with whatever was in the fridge, and read to Nora until she fell asleep mid-sentence, the way she always did. One moment fully conscious, the next entirely absent, like someone had turned a switch. He sat in the edge of her bed for a while in the dark room, listening to her breathe the even breath of a child who had nothing to worry about tonight. He wanted to protect that. He always wanted to protect that. He went to bed, lay awake longer than he should have, and eventually slept. The next 2 days at work were uncomfortable in the specific way of a place where something has happened but not everyone knows what. Derek was quieter than usual. Marcus avoided Logan's section of the open floor plan, which was both obvious and slightly pathetic. Priya, when Logan passed her by the printer on Thursday, said, "Hey," in a voice that had apology compressed into it. He said, "Hey," back and kept walking. What bothered him, what he couldn't shake, wasn't the anger so much as the exposure. Not his own exposure. Maya's. The idea that for 5 Saturdays, while they'd been talking about her ex and his daughter, and serious bakery logos and receipt spellings, and all the small true things they'd been slowly giving each other, she'd been being watched from outside. Discussed. Checked on. The idea that she had walked through a situation that had been designed to diminish her, and had instead done something beautiful with it, had shown up with her sketchbook, and her honesty, and her unwillingness to make herself smaller, while the people who designed the situation were still treating it like their story to tell. It made him want to put himself between her and all of it, which he recognized as a feeling that deserved examination. He wasn't someone who acted from instinct without thinking it through. He'd learned, at cost, what happened when you did. But this time the instinct and the thought arrived at the same place. She needed to know, and he needed to be the one to tell her. On Friday evening, after Nora was in bed, he sat at the kitchen table with his phone and typed, "Can we talk tomorrow? Not just coffee. I need to tell you something." He sent it before he could rework it into something with less weight. The weight was real. Removing it would be a form of lying. Her response came 14 minutes later. That's a sentence that never leads anywhere relaxing. He typed, "No, it doesn't. I'm sorry for that, but it's important." A pause. Then, "Same place? 10? Yeah. Okay." And then, after a moment, "Are you all right?" He looked at that question for a long time. The smallness of it, the specific kindness of someone who had learned that "Are you all right?" was worth asking even when, especially when, the answer might require something of you. "I will be," he typed. "Talk tomorrow." He put the phone down and sat in the kitchen a while longer, listening to the building settle around him, the way old buildings do. And he thought about all the things he was going to have to say in the morning and tried not to think too hard about how she might receive them. He slept badly. Nora woke him at 6:15 to inform him that she'd had a dream where the serial villain had finally been brought to justice, and the details of this were important and could not wait. He listened to all of it, propped up on one elbow, eyes half open, nodding at what seemed like the right moments, and thought that there was something that only existed in the specific texture of parenting a 7-year-old. A patience that wasn't really patience, just a different kind of presence. A willingness to be wherever she needed you to be, even when you had your own things pulling at you. He made her breakfast. He got her settled with her books. He got in the shower and stood under the hot water and made himself rehearse it. "There's something I should have told you earlier. The way we met. It wasn't what you thought. It wasn't what I let you think." Maya was already at groundwork when he arrived. Same table as the first time, which he didn't think was deliberate, but might have been. She had both hands around her cup and she was watching the door, which she didn't usually do. She usually had her sketchbook or her phone. And the watching told him she was braced for something. He sat down, ordered coffee he probably didn't need, looked at her. "Hi," she said. "Hi. You look like you've been awake since 4. 6:15. Nora had a dream about the serial villain. Despite everything, the corner of Maya's mouth moved. Resolution? Justice was served. She was very thorough. Okay. She set her cup down, folded her hands around it again. Tell me. He told her. He told her all of it. The way Derek had framed it, the photo he'd been shown, the laughter in the break room, the understanding he'd arrived at in the time it took to cross the cafe floor. He told her about this group chat he'd inferred, the watching, the Priya report from Fremont. He told her about the conversation in the break room on Tuesday, overhearing his name, overhearing hers, the particular cruelty of being talked about as an accidental success story. He told her about the conference room, what he'd said, what Derek had said. He told her all of it without softening it and without editorializing. He just said what was true. When he finished, the cafe was doing its Saturday morning thing around them. The espresso machine, someone's kid dropping a muffin, two women laughing at something on a phone, the ordinary noise of people living their ordinary lives, completely indifferent to the fact that something was happening at the table in the back corner. Maya was quiet for a long moment. You knew, she said, when you sat down that first day. You already knew. Yes. And you didn't say anything. No. She absorbed that. Her jaw was set in a way he hadn't seen before. The wary quality that had been in her eyes that first Saturday, the one that had mostly receded over the weeks, softened by time and consistency, was back now. Sharper. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. That day, or the next week, or the week after? Because... He stopped. This was the part he'd rehearsed least, because it was the part where the honest answer made him look like he'd made a choice that prioritized his own comfort over her right to know. Because I thought if I told you on day one, you'd leave, and the situation would never be anything except the prank, and I didn't want that to be all it was. And then every week after that, I kept thinking, next week, when we know each other better, when there's more to hold the weight of it, and then I let too much time pass. That's the truth. I was protecting something I wanted, and I told myself it was also protecting you, which wasn't entirely wrong, but also wasn't entirely right. She looked at him. The set of her jaw didn't soften. Her eyes were very steady. What did they expect to happen? She asked. When they set it up. They expected me to be uncomfortable. I think they expected me to make you feel invisible. That was the funny part to them, watching me deal with a woman they'd already decided I wouldn't want to be seen with. The words landed in the space between them like something dropped from a height. Maya looked out the window. Logan watched her profile, the way she was holding herself very carefully, the way you hold yourself when you're taking in information that fits into a pattern you already know, and were hoping, this time, was not the pattern. I knew something was off, she said, that first day. You were too deliberate, too careful about how you sat down and how you looked at me, like you were making a point to yourself. She paused. I thought maybe you were just nervous. I let myself think that. I was nervous too, but not about what I thought. No. He kept his voice even. He owed her his steadiness right now. I was nervous about whether I was going to handle it right, whether I was going to treat you the way you deserve to be treated. A pause. I think I did that part. I didn't do the honest part. She turned back from the window. There were no tears. Maya Reynolds was not, he had learned over 5 Saturdays, a person who cried at the things that most needed crying at. She stored them elsewhere. I've spent years, she said quietly, in rooms where people looked at me and decided what I was before I said a word. And I got good at reading it. And I walked into that cafe and I read the room and something felt wrong and I ignored it because... She stopped. Because you were kind. And it had been a while since someone was just straightforwardly kind, and I wanted it to be real, so I let myself ignore the other thing. It was real, Logan said. I know that. She said it quickly, precisely. That's not the problem. The problem is that I was in a joke I didn't know I was in. The problem is that people who didn't know me looked at me and thought I was a punchline, and then watched from outside while... Her voice stayed controlled, just barely. While I showed up every week and trusted someone and talked about real things and didn't know there was an audience. Logan said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. It was true, and it deserved to just be true for a moment without him trying to qualify it. What did you say to Derek? She asked. I told him to stop. The watching, the talking. I told him that you were a person, not their story. Did he hear you? I think so. I don't know if that matters to you right now. It doesn't, she said. Right now. She picked up her coffee, looked at it, set it down. What matters right now is that I'm trying to figure out what to do with the fact that the beginning of this thing we've been building was built on something I didn't know about, and that you knew and kept it. I know. I'm not. She pressed her lips together for a moment. I'm not saying what we have isn't real. I'm not saying that. She looked at him with the directness she always had, but stripped of the warmth, or at least of the ease. I'm saying I need to sit with this for a while. I'm saying I need to not be in this cafe right now because I need to feel what I feel about this without performing composure for an audience. Okay. He said it immediately. No hesitation. Okay. He paid for both coffees. He got up. He paused at the edge of the table and looked at her. You really looked at her, the way he had on the first Saturday, making sure he was seeing the real thing and not a version of her he'd constructed from what he wanted. I'm sorry, he said. Not a generalized sorry. I'm specifically sorry that I knew and didn't tell you, and that you spent 5 weeks not knowing. That wasn't fair to you. Maya looked up at him. I know you are, she said. It was not absolution. It was just the truth of what she knew. He walked out into the Seattle morning. The sky was doing that thing it did sometimes. A break in the gray, actual light coming through in angles. The city briefly lit in a way that made it look like somewhere else, somewhere warmer. He stood on the sidewalk and let it hit him. Thought about Nora at home with Josie. Thought about code and deadlines and the refrigerator that was probably getting low and the ordinary machinery of a life that kept moving regardless of what happened in it. Then he thought about Maya's voice saying, I need to feel what I feel about this without performing composure. He walked to the bus stop and stood and waited, and for the first time in 5 weeks he didn't know whether she would text him, whether next Saturday would come and there would be a coffee shop somewhere in the city with a table waiting, whether he had done too much damage, or just enough to be real, or something in between that he didn't have the language for yet. He'd told her the truth. He'd said the actual thing. He'd sat across from someone who mattered to him and let the messy, uncomfortable reality of what had happened be messy and uncomfortable instead of papering over it with something easier. That was all he could do. He knew it. It didn't make the bus ride home feel like anything other than the longest 15 minutes he'd had in a while. At home, Nora was at the kitchen table with her books, and when he came in, she looked up and took in his face with that uncanny kid accuracy that always slightly unnerved him. Did something happen? She asked. Yeah, he said. Grown-up stuff. Is it bad? He thought about that. About Maya on the sidewalk the first night. This was a good afternoon. About the pastry pushed across the table without ceremony. About you learned to walk through it. About the way she'd said, I know you are. Not forgiving him yet, but not dismissing what they'd built either. I don't know yet, he said honestly. Nora considered this with the gravity she brought to things that deserved gravity. Then she said, You want to hear the rest of the serial villain dream? There's a second part. Logan sat down at the table. Yeah, he said. Tell me. She told him in the exhaustive and deeply committed detail that only 7-year-olds could sustain. He listened to every word. The silence lasted 9 days. Logan counted them without meaning to. It was a habit from code. Tracking time elapsed, noting when something that should have resolved itself was taking longer than expected. By day 3, he'd stopped checking his phone every hour. By day 5, he'd made himself stop checking it every few hours. By day 9, he was doing the thing he did when there was nothing to do except wait. He worked. He cooked dinner. He read to Nora. He fixed the leak under the kitchen sink that had been annoying him for 6 weeks. He went for a run along the waterfront on a morning that was cold enough to make his lungs ache, and he came back and stood in the shower until the hot water ran out. And he thought about Maya sitting in groundwork with her hands around her cup, saying, I need to feel what I feel about this without performing composure. He didn't text her. He'd meant what he said to Derek. She deserved honesty. What she also deserved was space, and the specific respect of someone who didn't push when pushing would only be for his own comfort. On the 9th day, a Wednesday, his phone buzzed at 7:43 p.m. Nora was in bed. He was at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and a code review he'd been staring at for 40 minutes without seeing. I've been thinking. He put down the review. Yeah, he typed. Me too. A pause. Then, can we meet? Not Saturday. Somewhere different. When? Tomorrow? After work. There's a park near my apartment. Volunteer park. Do you know it? He did. Capitol Hill, up on the ridge. An old reservoir and a conservatory and long open lawns that in winter were mostly empty. He'd taken Nora there once in the fall to look at the leaves. I know it, he typed. What time? 5:30? I get off at 5. I'll be there. Another pause. Longer. He almost put the phone down. I'm not angry at you, she wrote. I want you to know that before tomorrow. I'm not angry. I just needed to think. He read that 3 times. I understand, he wrote. Then after a moment, I'm glad you reached out. No response to that. She didn't need to respond. She'd said what she'd needed to say, and he'd received it, and that was enough for tonight. He went back to the code review and actually read it this time. Volunteer Park on a November Thursday at 5:30 was exactly what you'd expect. Mostly empty, the light already thinning toward dark, the old reservoir reflecting a sky that hadn't decided between gray and silver. There were a few dog walkers and one person doing something athletic near the water tower that Logan couldn't quite identify. His breath made small clouds in the cold air. Maya was already there when he arrived. She was standing at the edge of the reservoir path with her hands in her coat pockets, looking out at the water. She heard him coming, his footsteps on the gravel, and turned. She looked tired. Not bad tired, just the tired of someone who'd been inside their own head for 9 days doing work that doesn't show on the outside. Hey, she said. Hey. They fell into step alongside the reservoir path without deciding to. It seemed like the right shape for this conversation, moving, not static, side by side rather than across from each other. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The park did its quiet winter thing around them. A dog splashed at the edge of the water, somewhere out of sight. I called my friend Diane, Maya said. After, I needed to talk to someone who wasn't involved. What did she say? She said I should be angry. She was pretty insistent about it. A brief pause. Diane is a feeler. She processes everything through feeling first and thinking second. I'm the opposite. So she kept saying, how does this make you feel? And I kept saying, I'm trying to figure out what I think about it. And eventually we just agreed to disagree about the correct order of operations. What did you think about it? Logan asked. After 9 days, she was quiet for a beat, watching the path ahead. I thought about the first day. I thought about walking into that cafe knowing something was off and choosing to ignore it because the alternative, turning around and going home and being right about people being unkind, felt worse than taking the risk. She exhaled slowly. And I thought about you, about the choice you made when you walked across that room, because you could have turned around too. You could have gone back to Derek and said the whole thing was ridiculous. You didn't. That's not the same as telling you the truth. No, she agreed. It's not, but it's not nothing either. The path curved around the near side of the reservoir. Somewhere behind them, a gate creaked in the wind. The part that was hardest to sit with, Maya said, wasn't even the prank itself. It was the watching. The idea that they were keeping score on something that was... She stopped, chose the word carefully. Private. The things we talked about. The week Nora was sick, and you showed up tired, and I ordered you a pastry. That was private. That belonged to us, and they were out there treating it like a subplot in a TV show. I know. Logan kept his voice even. I told Derek to stop. Whether that was enough, whether it actually stopped, I can't guarantee. I'm not worried about them anymore. She said it with a flatness that wasn't dismissal, more like someone who had decided to stop giving a thing the power to worry her. I thought about being worried about them. I practiced being angry about them. And then I realized I was spending energy on people who were never going to change in the time frame I cared about. And that wasn't useful. What was useful? She glanced at him sidelong. Figuring out what I actually want, which is harder. The path straightened again, the conservatory visible ahead through bare branches. The old glass greenhouse, lit from inside, improbably warm-looking against the November dark. Can I tell you what I realized? She said. Please. I've spent so long waiting for people to prove they're worth trusting before I let them in. And it felt like a reasonable system, like self-protection. She paused. But what I realized, thinking about this, is that waiting for proof is also a way of never being disappointed because you never let anyone close enough to disappoint you. And that's not protection. That's just a very organized version of alone. Logan said nothing. He understood every word she was saying, and he said nothing because this was hers to finish. You didn't handle this perfectly, she said. You should have told me earlier. That's real, and I mean it, and I'm not taking it back. She glanced at him again. But you told me. You could have just kept it and hoped I never found out. You didn't. You sat across from me and said the actual thing, even though you knew it might cost you something. It might still cost me something, Logan said carefully. I don't know what you're going to say next. She almost smiled. That's fair. They'd reached a bench near the conservatory entrance. Maya stopped and sat. Logan sat beside her, close enough to talk easily, far enough to be two separate people having a real conversation. When I was in my relationship in Portland, she said, the thing that ended it, the real thing, not the thing we told people, was that he stopped being honest with me because he was afraid of what I'd do with the honesty. And so he managed me instead. Told me what he thought I needed to hear, made things seem finer than they were until they weren't fine at all, and it was too late to fix anything because we'd used up all the time that could have been used for actual honesty. She looked at her hands. I'd rather have a hard truth early than a comfortable lie that falls apart later. I gave you a comfortable silence, Logan said. I know that's not the same as a lie, but it's closer than I'm proud of. It's closer than you're proud of, she agreed. Yeah. A silence. The conservatory light filtered through the glass and threw soft shapes onto the gravel path. What do you want? Logan asked. He kept his voice level. After all the thinking, what did you land on? Maya was quiet for a moment, not the silence of someone who didn't know the answer, the silence of someone choosing how to say it. I want this to keep going, she said. I want the Saturdays. I want the texts about Nora's theories. I want whatever this is. I want to see what it becomes. She paused. But I want it to be honest, completely. No more things you're holding back because you think the timing isn't right. If something is true, I need you to say it. Even when it's hard. Especially then. Logan looked at her. The tired quality in her face that had been there when he arrived had changed slightly. Still tired, but underneath it something that wasn't tired at all. Something steady. Something that had been examined from every angle for 9 days and had survived the examination. I want to keep going too, he said. I want it more than I've wanted anything in a while, which is part of why I was so bad at this. I was protecting it before it was even real enough to protect. He paused. I'm not great at this. Letting people in. Nora is the only person in my life I don't manage my distance from. I know, Maya said. I noticed that about you early. And you stayed anyway. I stayed anyway. The almost smile again, a little more present this time, which is either brave or stubborn. I haven't decided. Can it be both? Probably. He looked at the conservatory glass and the shapes the light made on the path and thought about all the ways this could have gone differently. All the exits that had existed at every stage. The parking garage, the first Saturday, every week after. The exits he hadn't taken, the ones she hadn't taken either. I want to tell you something, he said. Something true. She turned to look at him. I think about you during the week, he said. Not just when you text, not just on Saturdays. I notice things during the week and I save them for Saturday because I want to tell you. I haven't done that with anyone since before Nora was born. The saving things for someone. He looked at her directly. That's what I should have been honest about earlier, not just the prank. This. That this stopped being casual for me a while ago. Maya held his gaze. For me too, she said. Simply, without drama, the way she said the things that were most true to her. They sat with that for a moment. The park was almost fully dark now, the path lights casting small circles on the gravel, the conservatory warm and alive behind them. Can I ask you something? Logan said. Go ahead. When you said you sensed something was off that first day, what specifically felt off? She thought about it. The way you sat down. There was nothing casual about it. You made a choice walking across that cafe. She paused. And the way you looked at me. Not looking away, but not the other thing either. Not the up and down that some men do where they're checking you against some internal catalog. You just looked at me like I was a person you were going to sit across from and take seriously. That's what you were. I know. But I didn't know if you knew that before you sat down or whether you decided it when you sat down. There's a difference. She tilted her head slightly. Now I know it was the second one. You decided when you sat down. Yes. That's still something, she said. A lot of people don't decide that at all. He thought about Derek and Marcus in the hallway. The particular casualness of people who had never had to decide anything about how they treated someone different from them because they'd never been forced to examine the decision. I know, he said. She shifted on the bench, pulling her coat tighter against the cold. He noticed and didn't say anything about it. She was not, he had learned, a person who appreciated being managed. But when she exhaled and her breath made a small cloud in the night air, he said, "Do you want to walk? It's getting cold sitting still." Yeah. She stood. There's a place near the park exit that does good hot chocolate. It's not fancy. It's the kind from a machine. Machine hot chocolate is underrated. That's an extremely correct opinion. They walked back the way they'd come, the reservoir dark now on their left, and somewhere in the transition between sitting on that bench and walking back through the park gate, something shifted between them in a way that was quiet but complete. Not resolved. Things this real didn't resolve cleanly, but settled. Like two pieces of something that had been misaligned and had been carefully, deliberately moved back into place. The machine hot chocolate was from a diner 2 blocks from the park exit, a narrow place called Earl's that had the fluorescent lighting and laminated menus of a diner that had been exactly this diner for 30 years and had no intention of changing. They sat at the counter on spinning stools and drank it from styrofoam cups, and Maya told him about a project that had gone sideways that week, a client who'd approved the logo and then changed his mind after showing it to his wife, who wanted something different, something with more blue. How much more blue? Logan asked. He showed me a photo of the sky. The whole sky? The whole sky, just here, like this. A sky. She mimed holding up a phone. That's the reference. What did you say? I said I'd see what I could do. She drank her hot chocolate. Which is what you say when you're buying time to figure out how to explain why the sky is not an achievable shade for a restaurant logo. Did you explain it? I explained it. He understood about 60% of it. We're meeting again next week. Is he reasonable? He's sincere. That's different from reasonable, but it's workable. She turned the cup in her hands. The wife actually has good instincts. She just can't articulate them yet. So you have to translate. Half the job is translation. What someone means versus what they say versus what they actually need. Those are 3 different things. She paused. It's actually what I'm good at. The translation part. Is that what you did with me? He asked. In the beginning, translated what I was saying versus what I meant. She considered him. A little. You said things plainly, but you held a lot back. The plainness was real. I never thought you were performing directness, but there was always something else underneath, something you were watching. A pause. I figured if I waited long enough, the underneath part would come out. It took a while. Worth it. She said it with the same straightforwardness she brought to the things that mattered most. They sat at the Earl's counter for another hour, not talking about the prank, not analyzing what had just happened in the park, just talking. The way they talked on Saturdays, the easy accumulation of thoughts and observations and small true things. A natural return to themselves. When they finally walked out into the cold, Maya's hands were back in her coat pockets, and Logan fell into step beside her on the sidewalk. Next Saturday? She said. Next Saturday. I found a place in the Central District I've been wanting to try. They do pour-overs and they have a cat. A cat. An in-residence cat. He sits on the counter. His name is apparently a matter of some debate among the staff. The cat's name is debated? Two factions. Half call him Chester, half call him Bernard. The cat has no preference, which is very on brand for cats. Logan smiled. It was the first time he'd smiled today, and it felt like something that had been held in finally releasing. That sounds worth checking out. I thought so. She stopped at the corner where they'd need to go different directions. Logan? He looked at her. Thank you for telling me, she said. I know it wasn't easy. I know you sat with it, and it cost you something to say it. She met his eyes steadily. That matters to me. I know it does, he said. That's why I said it. She nodded once. The crescent earrings caught the streetlight. A different pair tonight, slightly longer, still silver. He noticed, in the way he was noticing everything about her these days. Go home, she said. It's late. You too. She walked north. He walked to the bus stop and waited in the cold, hands in his pockets, watching the street, and he felt lighter than he had in 9 days. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't, not entirely, and they both knew that, but because the thing that had been between them had been named and examined and set down honestly, and they had both chosen to pick up what was left and carry it forward. That was something. That was, in his experience, quite a lot. The following Monday, Priya stopped by his desk. She stood there for a moment. He could see her in his peripheral vision, the specific stance of someone who has come to say something and is now regretting the decision. And then she said, Can I talk to you for a minute? He took off his headphones. She sat in the empty chair across from him, the one that was theoretically for collaboration and practically for conversations nobody wanted to have standing up. She looked uncomfortable in the specific way of someone who was not bad, but had done something bad and was old enough to know the difference. I'm sorry, she said, for my part in it. I should have said something sooner. I should have told Derek it was a bad idea from the beginning, and I didn't. Logan looked at her. He thought about Maya saying, I'm not worried about them anymore. He thought about the 9 days and the park bench and the styrofoam cups at Earl's. Why didn't you? He asked. Not aggressive. Just genuinely asking. Priya pressed her lips together. Because it was easier not to. Because Derek makes everything seem casual and low stakes, and I didn't want to be the person who couldn't take a joke. She paused. Which is a terrible reason. It is, Logan said, but it's at least an honest one. She seemed slightly surprised by that. Not the agreement, but the lack of heat in it. Is she okay? Priya asked. She's handling it the way she handles everything, Logan said. Better than she should have to. Priya nodded. She looked at the desk. She seemed... When I saw her that day in Fremont, She stopped. She looked like someone who was having a genuinely good time, and I remember thinking, watching them, that this is not what we thought was going to happen. And I still didn't say anything. She looked up. I'm sorry for that part specifically. Logan held her gaze. Okay, he said. Okay? I hear you. I believe you mean it. He put his headphones back on his neck. That's as far as I can go right now. She nodded, stood up, and walked back to her desk. He sat for a moment after she left. The open floor plan hummed around him. Keyboards, a phone ringing 2 rows over, someone explaining something in the glass-walled room to his left. The ordinary noise of a workplace that had briefly become the setting for something that was never supposed to involve real people, and was now having to absorb the consequences. He put his headphones back on. He opened the code review. He worked. And when his phone buzzed at 12:15 with a message from Maya, Chester/Bernard. Update. Apparently the cat has now sat on the register twice, which one faction is interpreting as a vote and the other is describing as coincidence. He read it and laughed quietly to himself and typed back, "The cat is playing both sides." Her reply was immediate. The cat is smarter than anyone in that cafe. He put the phone down and went back to work, and the afternoon had that quality again. The steadier quality. The one he hadn't known he'd missed until it was back. And he let himself notice it without immediately worrying about what it meant or how long it would last. For now it was enough that it was there. The cat's name, it turned out, was neither Chester nor Bernard. On the first Saturday after the park, Logan and Maya walked into the coffee shop in the Central District, a narrow place called Silt, with exposed brick and hand-lettered menus and the particular organized chaos of a small operation run by people who cared deeply about what they were doing. And the barista introduced the large orange tabby sitting on the far end of the counter as Fenwick. Fenwick, Maya repeated. The Chester faction and the Bernard faction had to compromise, the barista said. She was maybe 24 with paint-stained fingers and the easy manner of someone who had found their right place in the world. Fenwick was the only name both sides could tolerate without it being a victory for either. That's either brilliant conflict resolution or a tragedy, Logan said. Little of both, the barista agreed. Fenwick regarded them with the complete indifference of a cat who had heard every possible human opinion about his name and had long since stopped caring. He blinked once, slowly, then looked away. Maya leaned against the counter and looked at Fenwick with the focused attention she brought to things she found genuinely interesting. He's got a face like he's heard everything and forgiven none of it. That's the most accurate description of him I've ever heard, the barista said. I'm telling the other staff you said that. They took the table by the window. The pour-overs arrived 12 minutes later. Logan had timed it, from habit, not judgment, and Maya wrapped her hands around the cup and looked at him with the ease that had come back over the last 2 weeks. Not the ease of the early Saturdays, which had been careful, calibrated. This was something that had been tested and had held, and holding had changed its quality. It was easier now in the way that things are easier when you know they're real. How was your week? She asked. Better than last week. He meant it. The office had settled into a new configuration, quieter, more careful. Derek had become someone Logan interacted with professionally, and nothing more, which was a cleaner arrangement than what they'd had before. Priya had started saying good morning to him in the hallway with the slightly extra effort of someone working to repair something. Marcus had largely made himself invisible, which Logan found adequate. Yours? I finished the bakery project. She pulled out her phone and showed him the final package, the logo in its final form, the color system, the packaging mock-ups. It was good. It was the version 11 he'd seen weeks ago but fully realized, with the brand applied across all the surfaces it needed to live on. She cried when I showed her. The owner? She said it looked exactly like what she'd been trying to describe for 12 years and couldn't. Maya put her phone down. The satisfaction in her voice was quiet but complete. That's the whole job when it works right. Logan looked at her. The way she said that, without performance, without needing anyone to congratulate her. Just a person who had done work she was proud of and knew exactly why. That's the whole job, he agreed. Fenwick jumped off the counter, crossed the cafe with the purposeful air of a cat who had somewhere to be, and stationed himself under the table next to Maya's chair. She looked down at him. Is this a sign? She asked. The cat has made a choice, Logan said. Take it seriously. She reached down and scratched behind Fenwick's ears. Fenwick allowed this with the dignified resignation of royalty, accepting a tribute they hadn't requested but would not refuse. This was, Logan thought, a good Saturday. He had been thinking about telling her something. He'd been holding it for 2 weeks, not out of the old habit of protective withholding. He'd made a promise to himself and to her about that, but because he was trying to find the right shape for it. Some things deserved to be said carefully, not because they were dangerous, but because they were true in a way that mattered and deserved the right words. Can I say something? He said. Maya looked up from Fenwick. You don't usually ask. This one feels like it needs a runway. She set both hands around her cup and gave him her full attention the way she did. No performance of listening, just actual listening. I've been thinking about the last few months, he said, from the beginning, what the beginning actually was and what it turned into. And I keep coming back to something I couldn't have told you on that first Saturday because I didn't know it yet. He paused. I stopped trusting people a long time ago. Not in a dramatic way, gradually. A wall that went up so slowly I didn't notice it was there until I was completely behind it. He looked at her steadily. And you didn't knock it down. You didn't climb over it. You just kept showing up every week and talking to me like I was worth talking to. And somewhere in there I started leaving the door open a little more each time without deciding to. Maya was very still. That's what you did, he said. I want you to know that I know that. She was quiet for a moment. Outside, the Central District went about its Saturday business. Fenwick settled his considerable weight against Maya's ankle like he'd decided this was his spot now. "You did the same for me," she said. "You just don't know what you were opening the door to." "Tell me." She took a breath. Not a dramatic breath, a settling breath, the kind that precedes honesty. "When I moved here, I told myself I was starting over. Fresh start, new city, nobody knows the old version of you. And I believed that was what I needed." She looked at the pour-over. "But what I actually did for the first 6 weeks was bring all the same armor with me and just install it in a new apartment. I was careful. I was managed. I was the version of me that had learned to take up exactly the right amount of space. Not too much, not too little, just enough to be acceptable." She looked up at him. "And then I walked into that cafe, and you sat down across from me, and you were so deliberately honest about being nervous, about almost not coming, and I thought, this person is not performing anything, and I didn't know what to do with that." "You matched it," Logan said. "You were just as honest." "I was terrified," she said. "The whole time. I just hit it better." He smiled. She smiled. "We're both disasters," she said. "Functional disasters." "Barely." He reached across the table, a deliberate movement, not impulsive, and put his hand over hers where it rested beside the cup. She looked at his hand, then at him, and didn't move away. "I'm glad I went into the cafe," he said. "I'm glad you didn't stay in the parking garage." "I almost did." "I know." She turned her hand so their fingers were properly linked. Her hand was warm from the cup. "I'm glad you chose differently." They stayed at Silt for 3 hours. Fenwick relocated twice, once to the windowsill, once back to Maya's feet, as if keeping tabs on the situation. When they finally left, the barista called after them, "Come back! Fenwick's choosing his people carefully these days." On the sidewalk, Maya tucked her arm through Logan's as they walked. It was the first time they'd done that. Easy, unannounced, like it was the obvious next thing. It was. It was the obvious next thing. Impossible. December arrived the way Seattle Decembers do. Not with drama, but with a deepening of what was already there. More gray, more rain, the city pulling inward, Christmas lights doing their best against the perpetual damp. Logan's apartment acquired a small tree that Nora had campaigned for with the focused determination she brought to things she'd already decided were happening. It was crooked and slightly too tall for the corner she'd selected, and she loved it completely. On a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after Silt, Logan told Nora that Maya might come to the winter market at Seattle Center with them on Saturday. Nora looked up from her library book. "The coffee shop, Maya?" she said. "Yes." "Is she your girlfriend?" Logan thought about that, about the word and what it contained and whether it was adequate to what had been built over these months. He decided adequacy wasn't the point. "Yes," he said. "She is." Nora considered this with the gravity she brought to significant information. Then she went back to her library book, apparently satisfied. "Will she think the Space Needle is pretty okay?" she asked, without looking up. "She might have her own opinion. Does she have theories about things?" "Different things than you, but yes." Nora turned a page. "What things?" "Colors. Why some of them work together and some don't." A pause. "That's interesting," Nora said in the tone of someone revising their initial assessment upward. "I have a theory about that too." "I know you do," Logan said. "You can tell her." Chant. Saturday morning was cold and bright. One of those December mornings Seattle managed occasionally, like a gift it hadn't committed to giving and might take back any minute. Maya arrived at Logan's apartment at 10 o'clock with a canvas bag over one shoulder and the rust-colored sweater from the first Saturday, which Logan recognized and didn't say anything about. Nora was waiting in the hallway with her coat already on. She looked at Maya with the unguarded assessment of a 7-year-old, which is the most honest form of assessment that exists. "Hi," she said. "Hi, Nora," Maya said. "I've heard a lot about you." "My dad talks about me." "All the time." Nora processed this information. Something in her small face balanced itself, like a scale finding level. "He talks about you too," she said. "He said you're actually nice. Not just polite nice." Maya glanced at Logan. He kept his face neutral. "That's a good distinction," Maya said seriously. "Which kind do you think I am?" "I don't know yet," Nora said. "I have to talk to you more. Fair enough. How long does it usually take you? Nora thought about it. Depends on the person. My friend Celia took 3 months. My friend Joshua took 1 afternoon. There's a girl in my class who's been there all year and I still don't know. What does knowing feel like? Maya asked. Nora looked at her with the expression she used when an adult had asked the exactly correct question. Like when something clicks into place, she said. You know how a puzzle piece makes a sound when it's right? Like that. I know exactly what you mean, Maya said. Nora looked at her for another beat. Then she turned and walked toward the door with the air of someone who had begun a process and would report findings in due course. Logan caught Maya's eye. She was almost smiling. She's exactly what I expected, she said quietly, and completely nothing like I expected. Welcome to Nora, he said. The winter market was the organized chaos of a city trying to hold on to the warmth of the season against the cold of the weather. Vendors selling hot drinks and handmade things, a string quartet playing somewhere near the fountain, children in puffy coats treating the cobblestones like an obstacle course. Nora moved through it with the focused energy of someone who had a plan she hadn't shared with anyone. She found the color-dye scarf vendor and stood there for 4 full minutes examining the options with an intensity that the vendor clearly found equal parts charming and unnerving. She's deciding, Logan said. I can see that, Maya said. She was watching Nora with the quiet interest she brought to things she genuinely wanted to understand. Does she always take this long? She takes exactly as long as she needs, no longer, no shorter. That's a quality I respect. Nora selected a scarf in deep green and brought it to Logan for approval, which was not really a request for approval. It was a formality she observed because she'd learned that adults appreciated the gesture. Good choice, he said. I know, she said. Then she looked at Maya. What color would you pick? Maya studied the display. She didn't rush it. She took it seriously, which Nora observed carefully. That one, Maya said. She pointed to a scarf in a very particular shade of terracotta. The colors in it work with each other because they're from the same family, but they're not identical. They have friction between them. That friction is what makes it interesting. Nora stared at the scarf, then at Maya, then at the scarf again. That's what I think about the sky sometimes, she said, that the colors fight each other, but it still looks right. Exactly that, Maya said. Something clicked. Logan heard it, not literally, but in the quality of Nora's attention, the way she turned fully toward Maya with the particular expression that meant she had found something worth taking seriously. He'd seen that expression directed at nature documentaries and library books, and the occasional adult who had said exactly the right thing. He hadn't seen it directed at a person outside their small circle before. He didn't make anything of it out loud. He just held it, quietly. They ate lunch at a stall near the center of the market, clam chowder and bread bowls, which Nora declared acceptable on the grounds that it was warm and did not smell like Pike Place. Maya ate hers with the pleasure of someone who was cold and hungry and not performing any opinion about what she was eating, which Nora watched with approval. Dad says you make pictures for companies, Nora said. Logos and things like that, Maya said. What's a logo for? It's so you know who something belongs to before you read any words. Like, when you see the Apple on your dad's laptop, you know what kind of laptop it is before you even see the brand name. Nora thought about this with chowder on her spoon. So it's like a language that's faster than reading. Maya looked at her. That is exactly what it is. That's a better definition than I usually give. Can I see some of yours? Maya pulled out her phone and opened her portfolio app. Nora leaned over and looked through it with the same systematic attention she'd given the scarf display. She stopped at the bakery project, the one with the sage green and navy and the serious logo. This one, she said. This one is my favorite. Why? Maya asked. It looks like it knows what it is, Nora said. Some of the other ones look like they're trying to be something. This one just is something. Logan watched his daughter hand Maya's phone back and return to her chowder, and he thought about something Maya had said months ago at the cafe. Fine works. Good lasts. He thought about all the things Nora said that landed in that category. Things that were true and simple and cut through everything around them to the actual point. She got that from him partly. He'd always known it, but it was something else to watch another person recognize it. After lunch, Nora ran ahead toward the carousel near the south end of the market, and Logan and Maya walked the same path at a slightly more adult pace. The afternoon had the quality of the season. The low light, the cold that was crisp rather than brutal, the smell of roasted nuts from a cart somewhere nearby. "She's wonderful," Maya said. It wasn't a performance, just an observation she'd arrived at and was reporting. "She's a lot," Logan said. "She's also wonderful. Both are true." "The color theory thing." Maya shook her head slightly. "She's 7. She's been like that since she could talk. She just sees patterns in things. She doesn't know it's unusual. She thinks everyone sees it." "That's the best kind of gift," Maya said. "The ones you don't know you have." They found Nora at the carousel, examining it with the analytical attention she brought to everything new. She had decided she wanted to ride it, which she communicated not by asking, but by looking at Logan with the expectation of a child who has already determined the answer. "Once," Logan said. "Twice. Once and a half. You can't ride a carousel once and a half," she said. "Watch me." Maya pressed her lips together, suppressing something. "Twice," she said to Logan, without looking at him. "Come on, it's the winter market." Nora looked at Maya with an expression that might have been the beginning of a devoted alliance. "Twice," Logan said, like he'd decided this himself. They rode the carousel twice. Nora chose a white horse. Maya chose a sleigh bench on the grounds that horses, while aesthetically valid, were not structurally trustworthy. Logan stood beside the sleigh with his hand on the back of it, which was technically not riding at all, and Nora called this cheating from across the platform, and the carousel operator had the expression of someone who had seen everything. On the walk back through the market, Nora's hand found Maya's without announcement, the way children do things when they've decided something, without checking whether the other party is ready, operating on the assumption that the world will accept what they offer. Maya looked down at the small hand in hers and didn't make anything of it, just held it, adjusted her grip slightly so it was comfortable for both of them, kept walking. Logan watched this from slightly behind and felt something move through him that he didn't try to name, because some things resist naming and are better off just being felt. Bassasem. January came, then February. The weeks had a shape now. The Saturday coffees, the weekday texts, evenings sometimes where Maya came over and they cooked something ambitious and usually partially successful and ate it at Logan's kitchen table, while Nora provided detailed commentary on every component. Maya was working on a new project, a small independent bookstore in Fremont that had been operating since the 90s and needed its visual identity updated without losing the thing that made it itself. She brought the briefs to their Saturday coffees sometimes, and they talked through them, Logan approaching the design problems the way he approached code, Maya finding his questions useful in the particular way that an outside perspective is useful when you've been too close to something. In February, she showed him the first draft of the bookstore logo. He looked at it for a long time. "The typeface," he said. "What about it?" "It's doing something the last version wasn't doing. It looks used, like it's been read. That's intentional. It's a slightly degraded serif, like a book that's been handled a lot." "That's exactly right," he said. "That's the whole brief in one typographic choice." She looked at the screen. "I've been fighting with it for 2 weeks. It's done. It might be done." "It's done, Maya." She looked at it again, leaned back in her chair, let out a slow breath. "Yeah," she said. "It's done." He looked at her across the coffee shop table, analog again, a full circle back to the second Saturday, and thought about all the work it had taken to be here. Not the romantic work, not the obvious effort of two people finding each other. The internal work, the particular labor of deciding, at some point in your 30s, that you were going to stop protecting yourself so efficiently that no one could reach you, that you were going to choose the risk of something real over the safety of nothing. It wasn't a clean decision. It didn't happen once. He'd made it over and over again. Every Saturday, every honest text, every moment he'd felt the old reflex to withdraw and had consciously, deliberately chosen not to. It was work that looked like nothing from the outside. It was the hardest work he knew. Maya was doing the same work. He knew it because he could see it. In the way she'd learned to say what she wanted instead of waiting to see what he offered first, in the way she'd stopped editing herself mid-sentence and had started saying the full thought. She was, slowly and with effort, becoming the version of herself that didn't make herself smaller. It wasn't done. That kind of work is never done. But she was further along than she'd been in September, and so was he, and they were doing it in the same direction. That was the thing he'd never expected. Not just to find someone, but to find someone whose growth was going the same way as his. In March, Derek stopped Logan in the hallway. Logan stopped walking, waited. Derek looked like he'd been carrying something he was tired of carrying. "I wanted to say something," he said. "I've been meaning to for a while." "Okay." What we did, it was wrong. I don't mean accidentally wrong, like I didn't realize at the time. I mean, I knew something about it felt off, and I did it anyway because it seemed like it would be funny, and I didn't think hard enough about the fact that there were real people in it. He paused. "I've been thinking about that, about why it seemed okay to me when it clearly wasn't. And I don't have a great answer. I didn't think about Maya as someone who would be affected. I thought about her as a prop." He said it with visible discomfort. "I know how that sounds." "It sounds accurate," Logan said. "Yeah." Derek put his hands in his pockets. "I'm sorry, not a general sorry. I'm specifically sorry that I treated someone like a prop and then watched like it was entertainment." He met Logan's eyes. "And I'm sorry I put you in a position where you had to carry that." Logan looked at him. He thought about Maya in groundwork on the morning he'd told her. The set of her jaw, the steadiness of her eyes, the way she'd said, "I need to feel what I feel about this," without performing composure. He thought about 9 days of silence and a park bench in November dark and machine-hot chocolate in styrofoam cups. "I believe you," Logan said. "I don't know if that fixes anything, but I believe you mean it." Derek nodded. "That's fair?" He hesitated. Are you? "Yeah," Logan said. "We're good." Something in Derek's expression loosened slightly. Not relief. He didn't deserve relief yet, and Logan suspected he knew that. Just the acknowledgement of a fact that was better than the alternative. They went back to their separate desks. The office did what offices do. Continued, absorbed, moved forward. The drama of it had already begun to fade the way office dramas do, becoming one of those things that people remember vaguely and don't bring up, gradually less interesting than whatever was happening now. Logan found he didn't need it to be more resolved than that. He wasn't looking for grand gestures or full reconciliation. He was looking for people to know what they'd done and carry it honestly, which was all you could ask of anyone. On a Saturday in late March, Logan and Maya went back to groundwork. Not planned. They'd been walking in Eastlake, one of those extended walks they'd developed the habit of on good weather days, and the walk had brought them past the corner of Eastlake and Mercer, and they'd both slowed, and Maya had said, "Should we?" And he'd said, "Yeah," and that had been the whole decision. The cafe was the same. Of course it was. Groundwork had the settled quality of a place that didn't rearrange itself for anyone. The same worn tables, the same smell of dark roast deep in the wood, the same hiss of the espresso machine, the same Saturday afternoon light through the same windows. They got their drinks. They found a table. Not the back corner table. That one was taken by a man working on a laptop with the focused misery of someone on a deadline. They sat near the window instead, the rain making the familiar Seattle patterns on the glass, the streetlight outside already on in the early spring gray. Logan looked at the cafe, at the way the light fell, at the distance between where they were sitting now and where he'd sat on that October Saturday, and seen a woman he didn't know yet looking up from her phone with cautious eyes. 6 months, he said. Maya looked up. "Since the first Saturday?" "Yeah." She considered the cafe with the same weighing attention. "It looks different," she said. "Does it?" "It looks like a place where something happened. Before it just looked like a cafe." He understood that. The way places become themselves once something real has happened in them. The way you can walk back into a room and feel what the room has held. "I'm glad you were here," he said. "That first day. That you didn't leave." I thought about it, she said. When I was waiting, I thought about just finishing my coffee and going home before you arrived and texting Derek that I'd waited and he'd stood me up. Would you have? Probably not. I'm not great at leaving first. She held her cup. I'm better at staying when I should go and going when I should stay. Is that changing? She thought about it. I think I'm getting better at knowing the difference, she said, which is the part that actually matters. He thought about all the times he'd almost left. The parking garage. The moment he'd seen her across the cafe and understood the prank. Every week after, the old instinct pulling at him. This is too much. This is too risky. This is something you could lose, and the losing would cost you more than you should spend. He thought about all the times the instinct had been wrong. Can I say something? Maya said. You don't usually ask. She smiled. This one needs a runway. He set his coffee down and gave her his full attention. I came to Seattle because I needed to be somewhere that didn't know the smaller version of me, she said. That's what I told you. That's what I told Diane. That's what I told myself. She paused. But I think what I actually needed wasn't a place that didn't know me. I think I needed to find out if I could be the full version of myself in front of someone else, not alone in a new city, in front of a specific person who was paying attention. She met his eyes. You were paying attention from the beginning. Even when I didn't know what you were paying attention to, you were doing it. And I think being seen that consistently by someone who kept showing up, I think that's what actually did it. Logan was quiet for a moment. You were doing the same thing for me, he said. You just made it look easier. It wasn't easier. I know. She reached across the table. He took her hand. The rain kept doing what the rain does. I have something to tell Nora, Maya said. What? The bookstore client offered me a full contract, ongoing work. They want me as their in-house designer for the relaunch. It's 6 months of steady income, which means I can stop taking the smaller jobs I've been taking just to pay rent. She exhaled. It's the first time since I left Portland that the money math makes sense. Maya. I know. She pressed her lips together against something that was very close to the surface. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. It's one contract. It's the first one. The first one is always a big deal. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright in the way of someone who has been trying not to feel something too fully and has just lost the argument with themselves. It's a big deal, she admitted. Tell me what it means. It means... She stopped, started again. It means I was right to come here. It means the risk paid off. It means I'm actually building something instead of just surviving in a new place. She paused. It means the version of me that got on the bus to Seattle didn't make a mistake. She didn't, Logan said. She got a lot of things right. Nora, who was at the booth behind them with a library book and a hot chocolate she'd been awarded for being what she called extremely patient about the adult conversation, looked up at the sound of her father's voice and said, Are you guys being serious again? Yes, Logan said. How long will this take? We're almost done. Nora considered this. Can I show Maya the cloud I drew on the bus? When we're done. How will I know when you're done? We'll be quieter, Maya said. Adults get quieter when they're done with the serious part. Nora absorbed this as legitimate information and returned to her book. Logan looked at Maya. She was looking at Nora's small head bent over the pages, and the expression on her face was the same one she had when she was looking at something she was trying to understand and simultaneously couldn't quite believe was real. He knew the feeling. He'd had it since October in various forms, directed at various moments. He had it now. He suspected he would keep having it for a long time, and he had stopped feeling like that was something to be cautious about. There are things nobody tells you about the kind of love that builds slowly. They tell you about the lightning strike version, the instant recognition, the movie moment. That story is told so many times it starts to feel like the only story. But there is another kind, the kind that arrives without announcement, the kind that looks, at first, like just two people drinking coffee and telling the truth, the kind that is built from small choices made consistently over time. The choice to stay when leaving would have been easier, the choice to say the hard thing when silence would have been safer, the choice to keep showing up even when you weren't sure what you were showing up for. That kind of love is not romantic in the way movies mean romantic. It is romantic in the way that matters, which is that it is real. It has weight and history. It has been tested. It knows what it's made of because it has been under pressure and has not collapsed. Logan Pierce did not plan to fall in love in a cafe on a rainy Saturday in October. He planned to drink one coffee, say something polite, and go home to his daughter and his code and the safe, organized quiet of a life he'd built to need very little from anyone. He planned to stay behind his wall because walls had served him, and he'd forgotten that the thing about walls is that they work equally well in both directions. He sat down across from a woman he'd never met and made a choice in the time it took to pull out a chair. It was a small choice. It was the kind of choice that doesn't look like anything from the outside. It was, without question, the most important choice he'd made in years. Maya Reynolds did not plan to find anything when she walked into that cafe. She planned to survive an awkward introduction, be polite, and go back to the careful, managed life she was building in a new city, the life where she kept her armor on and her expectations low, and her heart behind enough layers that no one could reach it without significant effort. She had been hurt enough times to know that effort was not a guarantee. She had not been hurt enough to stop trying altogether, which was the thing that saved her. She stayed for the coffee. She stayed for the person who was honest about being nervous. She stayed for 5 Saturdays, and then for a park bench in November, and then for all the Saturdays after that. And in staying, she became herself in a way she hadn't been since before she learned to be careful. None of this happened smoothly. Nora was not an easy child. She was a complicated, brilliant, demanding 7-year-old who had opinions about everything and expressed them. Logan was not an easy man. He was slow to trust and quick to retreat and had spent so long managing his own emotions that he sometimes forgot other people needed to know he had them. Maya was not an uncomplicated partner. She carried years of other people's judgments in her body and had to actively resist the impulse to make herself smaller, even when she knew she didn't have to anymore. They figured it out the way people actually figure things out, imperfectly, incompletely, with false starts and miscommunications and moments where one or both of them was not their best self and had to come back and try again. That is the version of the story that is true. That is the version that lasts. In the cafe on that March Saturday, with the rain on the windows and Nora's hot chocolate growing cold behind them, and Fenwick the cat nowhere in sight but somehow spiritually present, Logan looked at Maya and thought, "This is not what I expected." He'd been saying that to himself since October. Every Saturday, every text, every morning he woke up, and the first thought in his mind was something he'd wanted to tell her. This is not what I expected. It was by a considerable margin better. "Hey," Nora said from the booth behind them. They both turned. She held up her library book. She had drawn a cloud on the inside back cover, in pencil, with the loose, gestural confidence of someone who had been watching Maya draw for months and had started to understand that fast didn't mean careless. It was a good cloud. It was a cloud that looked like it knew what it was. "Is that a whale?" Maya asked. Nora looked at the cloud critically. "It might be turning into one," she said. "I'm letting it decide." Maya looked at Logan. Logan looked at Maya. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the coffee was warm. Somewhere in the city, a bakery existed with a serious logo and a visual identity it had taken 12 years to find. Somewhere in Fremont, a bookstore was preparing for a relaunch. Somewhere on Capitol Hill, a cat named Fenwick was presiding over a cafe with the particular authority of someone who had been in the same place long enough to know exactly what it was worth. And in Groundwork, on the corner of Eastlake and Mercer, in the same cafe where something had quietly begun on a rainy October Saturday, 3 people sat together in the ordinary warmth of an ordinary afternoon, and the afternoon was enough, and the afternoon was everything, and outside the rain was just the rain doing what the rain does, falling on the city the same way it always had, indifferent to what was beginning underneath it, indifferent to what was being built. Some things don't need the rain to stop. They just need you to come inside.